Hello everyone, I'm Colm O Regan and this is The Climate's Gone a Bit Funny, talking about climate change with comedy. So I'm here today to talk to you about trying to explain climate change or come to grips with it through comedy. And that sounds like a terrible idea. For a start, talking about comedy, the study of comedy, it sounds a bit like explaining the joke. And, you know, if you're explaining the joke, chances are the joke wasn't good enough. Or maybe people just aren't as clever as you are and didn't get your joke. Anyway, we're going to try and talk about comedy a little bit because, you know, people study all sorts of things. You can get a degree in bagpiping. You can study surfing. You can get a degree in being a psychic. And getting that degree, if you can predict what's coming up in the exam using your psychic powers, you don't even need to do the exam, you get your degree straight away. So I think we can talk about comedy a little bit anyway. First things first though, you have to admit, comedy about climate change has a number of challenges. First of all, climate change is really serious. Biodiversity collapse is really serious. Do people even want to hear about it?
Alright, well thanks a lot for coming. We've been playing for 3.5 hours. Now we'd like just a minute of your time to say something about the environment.
Oh, you suck! Shut up and play!
Preaching!
Like, it's no wonder that we're all sort of in denial. I know that I certainly have been in denial about it in my comedy. Global warming? What's that all about? We could do with a bit of global warming here in Ireland, couldn't we? With all the rain and the cold, the immersion, Is this on?
Should I run about this?
The second problem with talking about climate change and biodiversity is that it's really complicated. And every time you try to do something, it turns out it mightn't have been the right thing. Take, for example, trees. Quick, trees soak up the carbon. Let's plant a load of trees to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. What trees should we plant? I don't know. Any trees. Just plant some trees. But shouldn't we just do a bit of research? Don't mind your research, just plant some trees.
A few moments later.
Okay, sorry. It turns out they were the wrong trees. Or the bees. Quick, the pollinators are in trouble. Get some bees. What bees? Any bees, you know, the buzzy ones. Well, there's 99 species of bee in Ireland. Shouldn't we do a little check to which bees? I don't care, just get some hives. Then it turns out that the hives we got are out competing the native bees, so putting the native bees into more trouble.
Well, guess I'll give up forever. That's the spirit.
Please note, we are not saying to cut down trees and slap bees across the side of the head. We're just saying nature is very complex and you can't just try and fix it. You need to really understand it. Back to the show. And the final problem about comedy and climate change is that trying to do something about climate change means trying to do the right thing. And doing the right thing, well, comedy isn't really about doing the right thing, is it? Like, comedy is about doing the wrong thing, about being inappropriate, making an idiot out of yourself. You know, sticking up 2 fingers to authority. Obviously, I'm not gonna show you sticking up 2 fingers. Like, I could write a carefully crafted piece about emissions and how we need to decarbonise society, and no matter how much I tried, it still wouldn't be as funny as if you just farted at the end of it. Because nothing is as funny as a fart. And it's just one of the rules of comedy, that a fart is always funnier. And being good is not funny. Sorry, I don't make the rules. And when you need to change society in order to stop damage to the planet, that involves telling a lot of people what to do, and people of all ages. Nobody wants to be told what to do, told to change what they're doing, told that what they're doing is wrong.
So that's it? You're just giving up?
No, of course not. Just telling you it's not that simple. For years, comedy has been used to satirize and expose the truth.
Gentlemen, we need to talk. My wife says you're trying to get kids to smoke. That's just not true. Well, what about this talk?
And what's more, comedy can be used to tell our stories And it's in telling our stories that you find out about people, and you find the common ground. And when you have things in common with people, it's easier to work together to fight some of the big challenges that we have to fight. Even if you're very different, knowing what you have in common can help. So my story, well, I do a bit of comedy, I write books. I've just written a book called Climate Warrior, which is about how to deal with all the bad news. So I'm 44, which explains why this is so cringe. And a little bit about me. I grew up on a small farm in Dripsey in County Cork in the 1980s. And Dripsey is a real place. It sounds like something you might catch, but it is very real. And it was a long time ago. Simpler times back then. You will see evidence of the great Irish jumper in these photos, and extreme hand-me-downing in this photo. I think these shorts are so short I might have handed them down to myself. Don't really know what I was thinking that morning, but I actually look like I am a 27-year-old woman going to Electric Picnic. Much simpler times. Yes, this is me washing my feet in a basin of water while a cat drinks out of the same water. That's real reduce, reuse, recycle. Actually, speaking of reduce, reuse, recycle, nowhere was this more evident than the tea towel iceberg, which is the hierarchy of cleaning cloths in our house. At the top, the good tea towels that were never used because the right caliber of visitor had never actually visited. Then there were some J-cloths, and all the way down to the bottom, the ultimate cleaning cloth. Here's one of your father's old underpants. He won't mind. Definitely no fast fashion in those days. This is an entry from my diary in 1986, where my mother got her first new pair of slippers in 20 years. So we grew up in quite a sustainable decade. So why am I telling you that and showing you embarrassing pictures of me? It's just about, if you're trying to write about all of this and write humour about all of this, it's important to know who you are and where you're coming from. What's your point of view? And I'll explain a little bit about that in a while. But first of all, what can comedy do to help communicate climate change? Number one, it attracts attention. Like you were looking at all the list of things to watch for this School Sustainability Network Climate Summit, and then you saw this thing about comedy, and you were probably a bit suspicious, and absolutely right to be suspicious, but you said maybe we'll have a look at that. That sounds intriguing. And of course it's been a massive disappointment, but still, briefly, I got your interest, and comedy can be really good at attracting attention to a topic that might seem a little daunting or complicated or a bit depressing. Number two, laughter can help you remember. If you've laughed while learning something, you might remember it a little better. I mean, remember the crack you had differentiating delta y over delta x, the absolute bants. But look at these two situations here involving protesters gluing themselves to things, right? Now, the first one is this one. You know the one. They threw paint at the Van Gogh painting and threw mashed potatoes at a Monet. You'll remember it. It's very memorable. But I think the second one is even funnier. So what's happening here is they've brought a climate activist onto a TV show and they've asked him, is it a good idea to protest this way, to glue yourself to things? And he responds by gluing himself to the table. That's just immediately funnier. I will remember their cause far more now because they asked him about gluing and he just glued himself to the table. And here he is being carted out. Another thing, comedy, humour, trying to make people laugh, it's sort of about building trust. You know, when you tell somebody a joke, you're taking a risk that they mightn't laugh at it and never want to speak to you again. So you're putting yourself out there. So I can show you this graduation photo that was taken of me in the days before Photoshop, where I had my eyes closed during the photo, because back in the 80s and 90s, we all had our eyes closed in photos and there was no second chance. There was no digital cameras, so what you did is what you got. And the photography studio, when they saw my eyes closed, tried to repair my eyes in the photo. And that's why I have a graduation photo where they've literally cut somebody else's eyes out and put them in instead of mine. And I went in for another photo, because you can't have a graduation photo that looks like you've been experimented on by a mad scientist. And in this one, I'm desperately trying to keep my eyes open, which gives me the look of a very wealthy son of American congressman who is very confident of not being convicted of a criminal charge. Because it's important when it comes to having difficult conversations around climate change that there's trust and that people don't feel intimidated by experts. Like, I know you probably were really, intimidated by me because I'm so impressive. And you might have been thinking, oh, look, there's Colm. He must be like, I don't know, a president or something. But when I showed you my vulnerable side in a series of stupid photos, particularly photos where I've got an eye cut out with scissors, I think I showed you that, yes, I'm just like you. So I think that comedy and humour has a role to play in the conversation about climate change and all the challenges facing the planet. And after this, maybe you can make your own sketch in comedy to talk about what you want to talk about. But at the start, don't worry about being funny, as you can see I haven't, and just ask yourself some questions before even writing anything down. First of all, ask yourself, who am I? And I don't mean that in a kind of oh dude, you ever just look at your hands and wonder who you really are? I mean, just ask yourself, what am I interested in? Am I interested in sport, in gaming, in music, in art, in politics? Just what is the thing that comes most naturally to you? Ask yourself, what kind of comedy do I like? Do I like slapstick? Is it satire? What are the things that you like to actually watch? And ask yourself who the audience is. Is it adults? Is it your classmates? Is it babies? Ask yourself, who are your tribes? Maybe you're a cyclist. What do cyclists laugh at? Well, I cycle and we just get a great laugh out of cycle lanes in Dublin. Seriously, they're hilarious. There's a big announcement about cycle lanes and somebody wearing a chain around their neck will say, I now declare this cycle lane open. Are ye happy now with the cycle lane, cyclists? And we'll say, oh no, we are. We're delighted with the cycle lane. Just wondering, is it supposed to end in a wall? Is that meant to happen? Or they might open a cycle lane with lovely barriers up on the outside, lovely wands, and they say, are you delighted now with your new cycle lane? It's segregated. And we'll say, oh no, we are. Just wondering, am I supposed to merge onto an airport runway? Is that part of the actual design? So just look around your life. What are you interested in? Who are you? And that will help you try and write something later on to talk about comedy and climate change in a funny way. So, are there any rules of comedy that you should obey? Apart from, obviously, farts are always funny. I don't want to give you rules. It's entirely up to you. I mean, you might ask, can you swear? Well, of course you can't swear. No swearing. No, you cannot swear. But if I had to think of one rule of thumb for comedy, try and punch upwards. Try and take the piss out of people more powerful than you. It's hard to find the targets. Big organisations have spent a lot of money making us blame ourselves. Years ago, the plastics industry helped make public sector advertising to convince people that littering was just the fault of the individual and not the plastics company who made all the disposable stuff. Even though they literally got us hooked on plastic. For 20 years, the fossil fuel industry spent huge amounts of money distracting us from the fossil fuel industry. So look, I don't know who your targets are in your comedy or when you're thinking about this in future, but just remember, if the little guy is blaming another little guy, if the little guy is mocking another little guy, chances are the big guy is getting away with it.
Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is...
I don't know, do you have any choice? Is it compulsory? Is it coming up in the exam? I'm not sure. But if you want to, your challenge is to write 1 minute of some sort of comedy piece. It could be anything. It could just be a speech that you deliver in the Dáil. Although it's going to be hard to beat the real thing.
I believe that God above is in charge of the weather, and that we here can't do anything about it.
No lesser person than the Prime Minister of Great Britain, our neighbours, David Cameron, actually has come out publicly to record his concern and his concern and his worry about the way the seagulls are behaving.
It could be an ad, maybe one of those ads that you see in front of a YouTube video and you really want to skip it, but you can't, like an ad for Grammarly where somebody's saying, "Hi, my name is Lance, and I choose Grammarly when I'm trying to write things. It's real fun, and you can hear me type like this." Or here on Monday.com, me and all the gang just joined together and we're so happy. So it could be an ad, it could be a radio ad, it could be a sketch, something that happens in your house. What is the kind of, you're trying to persuade your father or your mother or the adult in your life to do something sustainable, and they're saying, "Oh, don't be telling me about sustainability. I grew up in the 80s and my father used to switch off the key of the car 500 yards before the house and freewheel home." True story. So pick the situation that you're having it in, make it a minute long, and as I say, look into your life. What is it that comes most naturally to you, and write what you see. And don't stress about being funny. The wealthiest man in the world, Elon Musk, made this joke about let that sink in. No matter what you do, you'll be funnier than the richest man in the world. But most importantly, whether you're doing the sketch or not, and after this summit, keep the conversation going about all of this. We're not going to need heroes. We're going to need everybody to be involved and be engaged. Best of luck. I've been Colm O Regan. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.